I think a lot of our kind of work as astrologers and tarot readers and diviners is to reclaim that connection to the macrocosmic. And, that's not going to pay your bills. It's not going to give you health insurance. It's not going to fix your problems, but it's definitely going to make you feel less alienated from the world that we live in.
Welcome to Soror Mystica, a podcast exploring life's mysteries and magic through its symbols.
I'm Mariana Lewis, an archetypal tarotist.
And I'm astrologer Christina Farella.
And just as the Soror Mystica guided the alchemist through his holy work, we hope to be your mystic sisters in these conversations, guiding you deeper into the symbolic life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 39th episode of Soror Mystica. We are back on the computer, on the internet. We had a little moment of being in person, which is very exciting, but not permanent yet. So maybe one day, that's the dream, that we'll be able to live together in a real cloister somewhere and just.
I was going to say in
podcast.
A convent away from everyone except each other, and we'll just do the podcast every day.
But yeah, today we are talking about the macrocosm and the microcosm, which is something that we've hinted at all over the place in those podcasts. And so now we're just going to spend an hour diving into it. What does it mean? What does it mean for our magic and for our own theologies and our own kind of worldviews, our cosmogonies? What is it?
Cosmology. Because cosmogony is like how it all came
there
to
you
be.
Go.
So, but maybe too, we can talk about that a little bit. But yeah, the macrocosm, microcosm symbol or image or idea is something that even if we don't explicitly acknowledge it, kind of runs the framework of astrology and tarot and any kind of divination practice. So
yes.
We thought that it would be a cool way of talking about an esoteric idea and an esoteric symbol, and also bring in some interesting insights about how we interact with it with our astrology and tarot practices. So that's
beautifully put. Much more beautifully put than I am. My brain is acting.
You
right
are
now.
beautiful. You have a beautiful brain.
My nose is stuffy.
I've had like 5 cups of tea for no reason. So actually, the reason is because I woke up very early. But I'm trying to be alert.
So you're stimulated.
I mean, for now, and then I'll crash later and be really cranky. So that's my secret, everyone. Up and down.
I'm on the precipice of getting a little cold, which did not come from Christina. It came from some other mysterious place. And so I feel my brain being jangly. And
it's the worst. It was funny last time when we did our kind of Q&A episode, because it was a very like softball, like gentle episode to do, which was lovely to do it in person that way. But even that, I felt like I could not make any thoughts. I was really struggling. So
you did great.
I tried. I like that there were questions like, what animal would you be? I was like, I can talk about that.
It was great. It was wonderful.
And then of course I was like, many animals. So yeah.
That was a lot of fun. But yeah, so one of the things that we want to tell you about right before we even jump into it is Christina is teaching a class on the macrocosm and the microcosm, I guess you could say, all about astrology and reading your chart. So tell us about that and how people can learn more.
Yeah, I've been talking about this here and there, but starting July 11th, I'll be teaching my class called The Art of Chart Interpretation. This is a 9-week immersion in literally what it sounds like, the art of reading astrology charts with my particular lens, which skews heavy towards the archetypal and the mythically informed. So if you are an informed beginner to an intermediate practitioner, this is a great class for you to get some really grounding insight into the building blocks of the chart, and then interpretive techniques, how we bring together houses, planets, signs, aspects in a way that feels holistic, cohesive, informed by traditional astrology practices from Hellenistic astrology. And then how do we also bring in depth psychology perspectives? How do we bring in archetypal influences? How do we read our own unique symbology and myths into and from the chart? So I am a fan of this class. I've been teaching it once or twice a year for the past few years. Is that
Like
possible?
3 years, I think
Yeah,
you've been, yeah, because
that's
we started ours around the same time.
time has really gone by, but I believe that this is the only time this year I'll be teaching it. And
Yeah.
so if you're interested, and I'm not saying that to be salesy, but I'm just
No,
thinking about the
it
rest of
better
my
be the
year.
only time you're teaching it because you have a busy year ahead of you.
Things are happening. So this is definitely okay. So Mariana has forbidden me from teaching this again,
Yeah, you're
everyone.
not going to kill yourself
So
teaching.
if you want to be part of this cohort, this will be your last opportunity this year to do so. And really what I think the benefit of this class is that, there are many astrology classes out there that will teach you how to understand the planets, what do aspects do, like there's so many great practitioners, but I really pride myself in kind of creating a learning environment where we're bringing things together in a sort of intellectual and intuitive way. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to help you see the chart as a kind of living, breathing landscape of your psyche rather than just like a map of like, here's what job you should have, here's how to find a
Yeah.
partner, blah, blah, blah. So,
And you excel at that. Yeah.
Thank you. So if you are, someone who is looking to build your own astrological toolkit, if you're someone who wants to become a professional astrologer, join the class.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a professional aspirant astrologer. You can be somebody who uses this as a tool for personal development. But
Mm-hmm.
the class consists of 9 live lectures, which are recorded, so you can jump in from any time zone. And then in addition to those live lectures, we're going to be having 3 separate Q&A sessions that are themed to help us go deeper into the questions of each of the kind of lecture chunks that we're going to be doing. And that is always really fun to get to kind of hang out with people in real time and look at charts together and practice techniques. I also throw in lots of worksheets, workbooks that I've created.
Look at
A few
you.
guided meditations I've got for creative engagement
You
with
just
your
give
chart.
everybody everything.
You know what, Mariana? I try. However,
you're very generous.
There's also a good amount of additional supplementary reading material for people who are looking for some kind of actual like stuff to read beyond what I lecture on.
Yeah.
So it's a juicy class. I highly recommend it. There's a payment plan available. If you're new to astrology and you want to bundle this with my beginner's class, that's an option as well. So you can find all of this information at my website, which is just ChristinaFarella.com. And then, you can click over to readings and classes and you'll see the Art of Chart Interpretation listed there, or also we'll link the class in the show notes. So thank you everyone for listening to my 5-minute advertisement. But I hope to see you in class.
It's an amazing class. I took it. I think the first time you offered it.
Yeah, you're my guinea pig.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. It was so freaking good. And I really loved how much you brought in, didn't only talk about the chart, you brought in there's that lesson on magic and developing, more intuitive practices with it. It's just so fantastic and so comprehensive. So
thank you.
We always say but honestly, I can't recommend it enough. The best resource that I've encountered on learning astrology. So
that's so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. So do that. We're going to pick a book for our book club very shortly, but are you reading anything interesting right now?
Yeah, I'm reading a book called Lies and Sorcery. It's by an Italian author, Elsa Moranti, and it is really intense. I really love it. It's like a big, fat, giant book, and it's the book I'm going to devour this summer. Unlike Swan's Way, which I still failed to read last summer, and that was embarrassing. But I can do it with this one.
It took me a whole year to read Dante, and it was because I had like a class that it was forcing me to do it.
You're moving through it, that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that I'd never heard of this author before, but there was like a blurb from Elena Ferrante on the back of it, and I really loved My Brilliant Friend, and so I grabbed it. But it's like a very interesting, dark book. It's like a crazy kind of modernist style first-person narration from the perspective of a little girl who seems to live in an imaginative realm because she's an orphan and she's like been taken in by some other woman who runs a brothel. So yeah, it's like spooky, it's weird, I'm really enjoying it so far, and that's really fun. So that's like the primary thing that I'm reading these days.
That's nice. I
What
like
are you
it.
reading? Mm-hmm.
I just started Robert M. Place's Tarot History and Symbolism,
Mm-hmm.
which is I've had on my shelf for a while and perused it, but now I'm doing the deep dive, and the tarot history is just wild, and so much of what we think about the tarot is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just being very excited to be like, haha,
Mm-hmm.
my suspicions were true. This
Mm-hmm.
is where it really came from and all that stuff. So it's great. So I'm really, really in tarot land completely in my brain, but not teaching it, which is, I think, kind of what has to happen. Like, you have to
Yeah.
stop the teaching and telling other people about it so that you can go learn for yourself.
You have to refill your brain cup so that you can
Yeah.
actually have something to say about your
Mm-hmm.
topic, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's being nice. So, the macrocosm and the microcosm. I guess we should probably start with for people who haven't heard these terms before, what do they mean? What's like a definition for them?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the most basic definition, I suppose, would be the totalities of universe, right? So the macrocosm is macro, big scale, the big scale universe, and microcosm, micro, small scale universe. And so we have this idea is a very ancient idea drawn primarily from Hermeticism, ancient Hermeticism, that says that the big universe, the macrocosm, and the microcosm, the little universe of the person, which is where we kind of locate the microcosm in the human being, whereas the macrocosm literally is the universe and the stars and the planets and all the stuff, are mirrors of each other. And so this is the founding principle upon which pretty much everything that you and I both do
Yeah.
functions. And it is where we get the idea of as above, so below, which everybody listening to this podcast is probably posted on their Instagram at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Me too, guilty. Because this is this idea of as outside of ourselves and in the universe, and it happens around us, it also happens inside of us. And so this is the great esoteric mystery, probably of the West, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say the whole world, because I don't know if that's true for all places, but certainly Western, the Western tradition. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where we can start in talking about what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a totally fascinating thing that really is woven through so much of our just like work that we do, whether you're a practicing astrologer or a student of the tarot or you're a witchy person. There's
Yep.
this innate belief that things that happen in the cosmos, external to us in nature, are reflected on our personal level of experience. And also, our personal level of experience is a mirror of what happens in the cosmos. And so,
Yep.
the Emerald Tablet, I think that it actually first appears as an Arabic source,
Yeah. So
right?
so the actually, I was reading the Robert Place's book this morning, and this is what he was talking about. He was
Oh,
talking
cool.
about the alchemical and hermetic influence on the tarot. So that
Mm-hmm.
was very synchronistic. So yes, it was the Emerald Tablet was created by Hermes. It's attributed at least to Hermes Trismegistus. Is that how you say it? I've never.
Yeah, that's how I
I
always say
think,
it.
yeah. Which actually, little thing I found out from this book this morning, it just means Hermes the thrice great,
Yeah.
because that was a standard greeting in Egypt at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Is that when someone was very highly honored, they would say, the great, the great, the great, whomever. And so they don't actually know who Hermes Trismegistus is, of course, and probably it was a collection of a lot of people. But that's why it's Hermes Trismegistus, just because he's the greatest of Hermeses.
The three
The
though
the
popping up there is
three.
really
Uh
interesting.
huh. Yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
is. It's very cute. So Hermes, it's attributed to this person or many people or a group of people, who knows, called Hermes Trismegistus. And so the Emerald Tablet is basically the collection of writings or maxims, or whatever you want to say, rules about Hermeticism. And it is believed to have been written in around the time of Christ, like first century, second century AD. But the oldest document with it on it, I believe, comes from like 6th or 7th century, and it's in Arabic,
Mm-hmm.
Persian, basically, document, which then came to Europe, because it was Greek Hellenistic influenced originally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time period that all this was created, Egypt was part, or at least very influenced by Greece. I don't know if it was a Greek person in Egypt or whatever, but it came back because of the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the Crusaders going to the Islamic world to conquer
Yeah.
and colonize. And actually, they got the probably much better end of that deal because they got all the intellectual stuff, even
Oh,
though they
yeah.
failed their
Mm-hmm.
crusades miserably. Thank God. But so we have this text, which is originally in Arabic, so translated from not it was originally definitely in Greek, and then translated into Arabic, and then translated into Latin when it came back to the West. There's your history lesson that no one asked for, because I
No, it's
just read about it
perfect.
this morning.
This is perfect. So thank you so much for all of that. I think that that's a really great context, and that's obviously also important for our sense of history and historicizing, like where these ideas come from and why we have them, because
Yeah.
a lot of those Hellenistic texts were lost for a very
Yes.
long time and then reemerged due to the Crusades and colonization, and
Yeah.
became very emergent and important in the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Intellectual and also magical cultures that were thriving in Europe, and that is where today a lot of our access to these texts comes from. So there's this really important lineage and transmission of information that we kind of walk around and we just say, oh, as above so below, as within so without.
Mm-hmm.
It has this kind of really complicated story. And
Yeah.
it's actually a miracle that we have access to any of this
Yeah.
information at this point in general. So I love the history lesson. And
Yeah.
I hope that, that kind of sparks some good research for our listeners too, because it's really curious, I
Mm-hmm.
think. So
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
All of our Neoplatonic ideas come from this
Yes.
this thing of having these going through these crusades and finding these documents and creating these chains of transmission from the Islamic world to the European world. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever
Mm-hmm.
people have this idea that there was no intermingling of cultures at the time, it is so wildly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got it. Thank God that the Islamic world had a very still does has such a high reverence for knowledge and the preservation of knowledge, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have any of this today, because so much of it was lost, and it's really
Yeah.
quite beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things that I talk about in the first lesson of the
Look at that.
art of chart interpretation. I talk about the transmission of astrology from the Hellenistic world through, the ancient Islamic worlds and now to the Renaissance and then today. So there is this really important thing that I feel as a Western astrologer practicing tropical astrology, to acknowledge the
Yeah.
influence of Arabic cultures on my particular practice, because
Yeah.
many of our techniques of interpretation come from these scholars that were
Yeah.
working very hard
Absolutely.
to translate and maintain these ideas. So it's just endlessly fascinating. So if you're interested
Mm-hmm.
in that stuff, come check out my class.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I want to kind of back this up. So we kind of danced around the word cosmogony earlier before we
Yeah.
were trying to figure out what was going on,
I couldn't figure out which one was what.
how to describe our experiences. But when I think of the above and the below, basically we have this idea that the macrocosm is like, the firmament, the sky, the place where the planets and stars hang out. It's also the realm of the divine, of archetypal forces, of things that
Yeah.
are bigger than human experiences,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
the below is the mundane world, the earthly realm, the human, the small, the micro.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite sort of like images for this is the image in Hesiod's Theogony, where the world is born and it is created by Uranus, the sky god, being this dome over Gaia, who is, the earth. And so we have sky and earth, and there's this above and there's the below.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a really interesting just image to hold in our mind,
Yeah.
because Uranus, as a planet named for Uranos, is a very remote planet. He's a very macrocosmic planet. He's a planet that is full of ideas and larger than life concepts, and the future, and this kind of like just detached idea of what is possible. Whereas terra firma, or Gaia, or the earth, is so much of what obviously we need in order to live. And so I like just sharing that idea of like, the above being the sky of Uranus, and then the below being connected to Gaia and to our
Yeah.
earthly mundane experiences, right? So I think that yeah, I'll leave that there. I have more to say about that, but yeah, comes up for you when we talk about that?
it's the it is such an interesting thing that, in the ancient world, everything was literal, right? Because they're literally observing the world that they lived in. So this idea of of the above was very much what is out there, and bringing in this idea of the archetypal, and the collective unconscious is how we would expand it in our more modern psychospiritual language of
Hmm.
saying, yes, it's the planets and the stars, but um, it's also the great, ocean of knowledge and wisdom and experience that is not personal to
Hmm.
the each individual person. Um, and so the other thing I was thinking too, this has nothing to do with it, but this is always just the most fascinating thing in the world to me, is that at the same time, like this hermetic idea of the macrocosm and microcosm, they also had very strong ideas of what the spirit and the soul were, and they were very different things. And while don't necessarily want to categorically say that the spirit was a masculine idea and the soul a feminine idea. Soul definitely was a feminine idea. Spirit more flexible. But when you read the way that they're described, and it's not across the board, everybody saying it the same way, but there's pockets of this kind of thought that spirit is the thing that rises us towards the heavens, and soul is the thing that grounds us down into the earth. And so we're constantly in this tension between one part of us that wants to rise to Uranus, right, and go up towards the macrocosm and towards what's above, and then there's this part that's pulling us down into the earth, that's trying to make us real, and that is the soul, which is, in Latin, anima, animated, and what animates us literally gives us breath and life. So I just, that's this idea that just fascinates me to no end. I could like think about it and talk about it all day long, of like we're always being pulled in opposite directions. And one of the most beautiful ways of thinking about that dichotomy of masculine and feminine to me has been this, like, the masculine pulls us towards higher knowledge, greater understanding, this larger view, whereas the feminine, or one side of it, one, aspect of it, not the entirety of it, pulls us down into earth, into presence, into experience, into breath and life and blood, and just being here. So I just love that way of thinking about it so much. And just thinking about, I'd never like connected it before, that Uranus being the sky above the masculine god, and Gaia being the
Hmm.
feminine under our feet, just folds so nicely into that concept.
Oh yeah, it's perfect. In astrology, there's also the part of spirit, which is associated with a more solar principle,
Mm-hmm.
and then the part of fortune, which is associated with more lunar and
Yeah.
kind of embodied principles. So again, it's just like once you start looking, or just noticing that particular split between above and below, within, without, masculine, feminine, it's just like everywhere, and
Yeah.
it's really fascinating. And so I think that for astrology too, it has a particular, the above and the below is a very literal experience.
Yes.
Astrology really is just the study of the influence of celestial bodies on our earthly experiences. And,
Yeah.
this is something that people in ancient cultures noticed was relevant to living life, and, traveling and building empires and planting things and whatever, all of these important survival experiences for thousands and thousands of years ago. But
Yeah.
the idea that that we're connected to something that is so external to us and so unfathomable, right? We can't even see most of the stars, and we can see the planets as tiny dots that look like stars but a little bit brighter. The fact that we might be connected to them is something that, like, as a kid, I was very interested in, because we live in a world that does everything it possibly can to discourage us from feeling connected to
Yeah.
the higher purpose, unless you go to church or temple, or, like, unless you're doing it through some monotheistic practice, which is socially accepted / regulated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the most beautiful things about astrology and tarot and other divinatory practices is that it reminds us so much that we're innately connected to these things. And it's actually an inherent part of our human experience to be cognizant of our microcosmic connection to the macro, to the without.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of our kind of work as astrologers and tarot readers and diviners and healers and nurturers, or whatever we're doing, is to reclaim that connection to the macrocosmic. And, that's not going to pay your bills. It's not going to give you health insurance. It's not going to fix your problems, but it's definitely going to make you feel less alienated from the world that we live
Mm-hmm.
in. So that's kind of what the big fascination is for me, is that you naturally know that there's something else behind all of this stuff that connects us to something large and divine, to our origin. But what is it, and how do we really connect with it? So going outside and looking up at the sky is like the first way we did that, and it's the easiest way we can still do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think of the the idea of the macrocosm and microcosm, I think, is the best way that we can explain synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jung's famous quote that says something like, until you make the unconscious conscious, you'll project it outwards and call it fate.
Mm-hmm.
And what that essentially means is that until we are aware of all that's happening in the microcosm, we see it happening in the macrocosm, in the outer world around us, and we don't realize the essential interconnection of those things happening together. And so synchronicity is the principle of meaningful coincidence. So it's an acausal principle, meaning that there is no direct link between this happened to me because that happened to me. Like, I stepped on this nail and so now I have to go to the hospital, right? Like, that's not a cause.
Sad.
Yeah, I don't know why that's what came to my head. That's very interesting. But it's that I have been suffering with this complex, therefore this thing has happened to me. It's meaning. The thing that has happened to me makes me reflect in a different way on this complex or on this wound, right? So the connecting thing is what makes meaning of the experience. And Jung tried very hard to break that down with Pauli, what's his name? I can't remember his first name off the top of my head right now. But the physicist Pauli, and
Mm-hmm.
they were trying to do quantum physics together, and it's very ambitious and wonderful, but also a lot to try to take on. But I, as a witchy person, I can claim that one. That it's this meeting point of these two things. And I think trying to explain it with physics and these sorts of things, maybe one day that'll happen. I would not be surprised when I'm a ghost and I'm like looking in like 1,000 years and watching what what humanity has done to itself. If they have successfully proved that astrology is real and that
Mm-hmm.
synchronicity is real, I'll be like, yeah, duh. I mean, we just needed to get there. It wouldn't shock me. But I also don't think we need to. And I think that that's the
Yeah.
point, is to embrace the mystery. The mystery is the experience of it. So with synchronicity, the faith that the macrocosm and the microcosm are always engaged with each other, makes meaning of our experience and offers us a way to connect back to it. We do overdo it a lot, with like every time you see 222 on the clock and are like, oh my god, something huge is happening. Like, that's a lot. it can just be sweet and cute and give you a little boost.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, allowing the like thinking, using that to be part of your spiritual ground, to say the macrocosm and microcosm are always in participation, always in communication with each other. These are not separate ideas. And certainly in the medieval world, the ancient world, any world pre 1700, basically, would have agreed that there is no such thing as a separation between the outer
Mm-hmm.
and the inner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I love all of that. And I think that's what I was, gesturing towards. It's that we used to know that we're inherently connected. And now we live in a world that really tries to banish that idea. And I think that we live in such a world that really, like, quote, values the rational. I don't think anything that's going on right now is very rational. I think it's all extremely irrational. But we value, in this world, these enlightenment ideas of
Yeah.
logos, rationality, provability, etc. And so we've talked about this a lot in the show, these ideas of the innate invisible mystery and the mysterious connection to the
Yeah.
divine has been conditioned out of our cultural consciousness.
Yep.
And if you try to reclaim that, people often look at you askance and they say, why?
I
Why would you
know.
think that? Mm-hmm. So that's
Yes.
a whole other conversation. But
Yes.
yeah, I think the macrocosmic idea, for both of us in our practices is a way, like you said, of tuning in with synchronicity, which is
Yep.
certainly something that's relevant to, I would say, your work in particular.
Yep.
Like, I think
Yep.
that tarot has a
Tarot and
lot.
any kind of chance divination. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that in my work with asteroids, though, which is really
Interesting.
interesting because I don't have a solid mechanism for, like, working with asteroids in the same way that I do as I like for working with planets. For
Yeah.
example, we know that, like, Venus represents these, like, 20 things,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's, like, being generous, but we know that she represents a topic. With asteroids, there's, like, not a lot of established research on asteroids, but I know the stories that the mythic asteroids are named for so well. And usually, when a client of mine has a particular kind of experience or even an attachment to a particular story and myth, I can usually pop into the chart an
Oh
asteroid
yeah.
from
You've
that
told me
story.
some crazy stories of
And
those. Yeah.
and it has a really significant placement. And that is synchronistic in the same way that flipping a card over to answer your question
Yes.
feels. And so that's kind of like a non-standard astrological tool, which I love using as a divinatory method. But
It's so
um,
beautiful the way that
mhm,
you use that. It's so cool.
it's exciting what comes through. So, and then again, it's like this reminder, like, oh, I'm not just hyper focused on the myth of Cassandra. I actually have Cassandra prominently placed in my chart. I need to call in that archetypal force. I need to kind of embrace whatever that story is from that larger perspective, and that can be really healing for
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I think that something that we can talk about too is like the ways in which, you know, the macrocosm and micro, like we can use it as a tool, and we can use it consciously. It can happen synchronistically and through fate, right? Like the way that the asteroids just are there in the chart, and then that the person just knows that that's a story for them, and there's some archetypal element that they're attracted to there because there's a fate element to it. But for centuries, for millennia, even they have been using the ideas of how the macrocosm microcosm interact to do magic. And this is, if anybody here is interested in real occult practice, there is so much bad information out there on the internet, and I say this with a grain of salt because who's to say some guy in 1502 has a better understanding of this than some person on the internet in 2024? But I'm gonna say probably they do. Um, but I think that people should investigate the work of Ficino, Agrippa. There's so many. I'm sure there's a good book out there on this. I don't have it on my shelf right now. But the work of these Renaissance magi, I guess they were occult magicians, occult philosophers, who really studied the influences of these things together. So I did a paper actually in our grad program on the influences of music and magic in this time period, and how they would use music, certain chords, certain time signatures, certain musical aspects to influence the magical practices that they were doing, and kinds of things that they would do in that time period would be balance your humors. Try to if someone was really sick, try to encourage healing. These are the kinds of things that they would use magic for. And so all the elements of the natural world, of the um, I guess of the macrocosm cosm, could be understood and translated into some kind of workable thing. So there's some great charts out there on, like, the metals that are associated with the planets,
Mm-hmm.
and the flora that are associated with them, and these are the ways that we can create for ourselves more intentional magical practices if you're doing real, like, magic work. And I highly recommend that people start there with that information rather than just internet stuff that people have made up, because I'm sure that they got it from somewhere, but it's like telephone. It just, like, this person gets it from that person. And I always highly recommend, like, going back to some kind of source for it, because they thought about this for just centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came up with these things. So that's just like my little, me getting on my soapbox about real
I agree
magic.
with you. No, I agree with you. And again, this is actually the last class of my
Yeah.
Art of Chart Interpretation course. We do an intro to astrological magic, which is what you're describing. So,
Yes.
Ficino in particular was like a huge practitioner of astrological magic, which
Yeah.
is a magical, practice that is based on the sky, the chart of the
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is a really beautiful way of practicing that sort of as above, so below,
Yeah.
looking to the sky of the moment, noting what sign and what element a planet is in, and working with herbs and stones and
Mm-hmm.
metals and symbols that are associated with that
Yep.
particular moment to capture the magic that we're
Yeah.
experiencing and to kind of harness it. Yeah, I've used that to make charmed talismans and
Mm-hmm.
oils and stuff like that, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's complicated, but it's a really important thing to, like you say, kind of ground our
Yeah.
magical practices in, because there is a lot of like online, I'm going to say like online Wicca stuff that is like Wicca light, and it's
Yeah.
very simplistic and it's very watered down. And Wicca itself, I have my gripes with as a practice, but I respect it, and I
Mm-hmm.
respect Wiccan practitioners. It's just it's funny. It's very new. It's like
Yeah.
really, really new, and
And
people think it's quite old, but
I
yeah,
think that people don't understand that Wicca is not witchcraft. I
right,
mean, it's a form of witchcraft. It's not saying that it's not connected to witchcraft, but it is not like the word for witchcrafts.
yeah,
Witchcrafts is a broader term for any kind of practice that you're engaging with that literally works with this macrocosm and microcosm. And Wicca is a religious group, I
hmm
guess it technically is. That's like its own little thing.
hmm
I feel like everybody in sixth grade was like, I'm a Wiccan. That was very 1999.
yes, it was.
um,
It was. Wicca's just like about the seasons, but it kind of like takes a little bit from
yeah.
different like Celtic
And
culture and Roman culture,
it's
kind of.
very pretty. Yeah,
Mhm.
I've read a bit about it. I haven't studied it enough to have like any kind of feeling one way or the other. But it is a branch. It's
Yeah,
not
I
like
mean,
all
it
of witchcraft.
it kind of was like brought into the public eye in the 1950s. So it's like
Yeah, it's a new religion.
it's very little. It's very like baby.
Yeah,
Anyway, we're sidetracking
yeah,
ourselves, but
yeah,
I think that, but again, like, if you're drawn to that sort of practice and that sort of connection, grounding your work in astrology, which literally gives you the above and the below in the
yeah,
chart,
yeah.
is a really, really powerful tool to start with.
Oh,
So I think that is, yeah, it's all really fascinating to us. And so um, I have a quote actually that I want to share from Demetra George, who is like an astrological touchstone for me. She's an amazing kind of like leading lady in the field of astrology. And so she talks about this concept of ensoulment, which is to me very much an extension of the synchronistic macrocosm, microcosm thing. And she's talking about this in this particular passage in one of her books about the relationship between the gods in the sky and our physical experiences. So she writes, in astrology, we envision the world as ensouled. The planets represent the gods who mediate and transmit energies of the divine realms to the mortals, regulating and governing human life. Each planetary god represents some faculty of the soul, which links human consciousness to divine consciousness. Nice and sweet
That's
and
very
simple there.
sweet. Yeah. That's a perfect little summary of that connection between the macrocosm and microcosm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what we can kind of pull out from like how do we bring this into our own life, if you're doing like literal witchcraft, then that's a very literal way that you can go about it and being more intentional with the resources you use and how you use them, etc. I'm not like a very active magical practitioner in that way. I don't I'm more of a light a candle, hope for the best kind of a person. But I think that we can connect to the archetypes of the macrocosm, and this is something that I think that the tarot is really good at. The tarot in and of itself shows us, the macrocosm and the microcosm, in that here we are, maybe, how many people use the tarot? A couple million people in the world. I wish it was more, but alas. And we're all pulling the same cards, and yet they mean something particular for each individual person. So we see the macrocosmic archetype of the card, this great energy of life that we then experience personally. And I think we see this also in the world and the fool. Those two cards to me are the perfect reflection of the macrocosm and the microcosm, because the world is the last card of the tarot, and it is the world. It is the macrocosm. It is, we see the four signs, four fixed signs at the corners representing the four elements, the four seasons, the four corners of life in the world, right? And then inside is the world dancer, who is the androgynous being who embraces all duality. And we see the mandorla, which is that ovular
I love
wreath
that
that
word.
such a good word, that shows us the womb of life itself, that and all things coming through. And then we have the sky, we're like right in the middle of the sky, so we're not on earth at all, we're like somewhere out there in the macrocosm. And so we have this huge image, which is an impossible thing to read. As if you've ever been stuck with the world card, of course you have, because it's not a very human card. It's very, very difficult. It's very simple, and because it's so simple, it's wildly abstract to our human brain. So
It is super abstract.
do
Yeah.
not fret. And then we have the Fool, which I really do think I like to place after the world, because we go through all of this huge journey, and we get to the world, we meet the macrocosm, and we're like, whoa, here we are, everything is so huge. And then we come back to the Fool, that's like, I'm just this person walking
I'm
a
just a
path.
baby.
Yeah, I'm just walking a path, and I have my little dog, and I have like a sandwich, and that's all I got, and I'm going. And it's this radical shift from the great expanse of the entire universe into what is it to live authentically as myself, beginning the path, initiating the path again. And I think that that's such a beautiful reflection of how we experience this kind of integration of all things, being part of the hugeness of the world, and then living that simply just by being fully aware of the complicated aspects of who we are, and embracing all of ourself as best we can, all the integrated parts of ourself. So I really like thinking of it in a tarot way through those two parts, because I think it's very useful in kind of understanding how they work together. There's a medieval Japanese medieval series of pictures called the ox herding pictures.
Oh, yeah.
And they show, it's like this Buddhist kind of development, like the story of enlightenment, basically. And they're very cool. And then at the end, my favorite one is, I think it's the last one, and it has the big fat Buddha. And then it has like the youth who literally looks just like the fool. He has a sack over his shoulder. He's kind of standing there, and he started out with these beautiful clothes, and now they're kind of like dilapidated, and and this symbolizes the enlightened self, the big fat Buddha, the world, like the cosmic Buddha, like holding all of it inside of himself. And then the foolish one who is just starting the path, and they are of course the same. And so I think that is just this beautiful representation of that macrocosm and microcosm, also in a different way of looking at it. All of it being there, and then just also us being earthen of the earth and just trying to walk the path and make it make sense.
I love that. Yeah, I love the ox herding pictures. I have a little book of them. I had like a John Cage Zen Buddhism phase several years ago, so it was all about those oxes being herded. And I think that something that also just came into my mind as you were talking about the world and then the fool is that feels very much like the transition from Pisces to Aries, where it's like the kind of, omega and then back to the alpha. And how do we remember that, like, the oneness also is part of the individual experience that we're having, and we're kind of always shifting between those two modes, or we're always contained within it. And I just think that's a really beautiful idea. So that feels like a good place to maybe cap this off for today.
I want to close. Actually, I forgot to read this Ficino quote, and it's really pretty. So we'll close with little Ficino, who we both love. And Ficino says, by the way, Ficino is a Renaissance occult philosopher, and he's kind of the first translator of the Hermeticum, of the Hermetic texts into I think he translated them into Latin, I guess.
Yeah.
So he says, man is the greatest wonder in nature. All other things under God are always in themselves of one certain kind of being. This human essence is all at once all of them. It possesses in itself images of the divine things upon which it depends. It also possesses the reasons and models of the inferior things which it, in a sense, brings forth. Since it is the mean of all things, it possesses the powers of all. Therefore, it can with justice be called the center of nature, the middle point of all that is, the chain of the world, the face of all, and the knot and bond of the universe.
Beautiful.
And it's a lot of Ficino, but it's very sweet. We are the knot and bond of the universe. And how perfect is that? So now that we're all very inflated, we can
We can talk about a dream.
If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review or learn more about how you can support us on Mighty Networks, where you can get access to some exciting exclusive offerings. Or you can connect with us by sharing a symbolic experience, whether from a dream or synchronicity, for us to explore on the show. Thank you to today's sharer, and please tell us your symbolic experience or connect with us on our website, sorormysticapodcast.com.
Are you a small business looking to reach a targeted audience of people interested in all things esoteric? If this sounds like you, Soror Mystica would love to invite you to become an ad partner. We offer a highly tailored audience of mindful, curious, depth-seeking listeners, and we would be delighted to showcase your business and offerings to new hearts and new minds. Simply fill out an advertiser application form at our website, linked in the show notes below, or navigate to sorormysticapodcast.com/advertise with us.
Hello, my lovers of tarot, astrology, and the symbolic. Would you like to go on even deeper dives into topics that are even more niche and specialized and fascinating? Perhaps you'd like to explore angels in the tarot, or beasts in your dreams, or the thresholds of astrology. This is just a sampling of the bonus episodes we have over at our cloister. So go in the show notes and click the link and join us in even deeper conversations. We really hope to see you there. Sophia Core is a modern-day Renaissance femme who focuses on supporting individuals in reconnecting with their intuition and building a life that aligns with decolonial practice and process. Her books are currently open for consultation and coaching for those who are getting ready to travel through the underworld or who are on their way back to the surface and ready to align their lives with their values. Book yourself in for a free discovery call and make sure to follow them on Instagram. Their handle is in the show notes below.
Okay, so this dream is titled Dreams of Ghosts. And our dreamer writes, the friend of the dreamer writes, my friend has recently been experiencing a nightmare for the first time in years. Lucky them. In it, her apartment is haunted with ghosts and things around the house keep appearing and disappearing. For context, she has recently separated from her husband and moved into an apartment of her own. The dream takes place in her new apartment, though it seemed that in the dream, her husband was living there with her. We have some ideas about what it could mean, but would love to hear your take. So this is a very, I would say, like, not straightforward, but it's a pretty kind of like interesting reflection of the within and the without. So I thought that
It feels pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
You're gonna be the sweet Virgo person, and I can be the harsher Scorpio person.
Okay, I'm
I'd
ready.
say it's pretty straightforward.
By the way, no one thinks Virgos are sweet and nice, just FYI.
You
That's
are
just
the sweetest Virgo that's ever existed. So
Virgos are supposed to be mean, and I wish that I could be
that is
meaner.
true. That is true. I've heard. I don't know. I feel like every Virgo I know personally is a very sweet person, and I
Well,
don't
you
know.
have me and your grandmother,
My
and
grandmother, and then
we're the
my
best.
nephew is also just the most delightful young man. So
Mhm.
I have a lot of sweet Virgos around me, and I like them a lot. So I don't
Virgos and
understand.
Scorpios like each other
Yeah.
because we both love to complain.
Oh my
So
gosh, we are very good at that together. Yeah. Well,
anyway, go on. So go be a mean Scorpio.
I can do it. It seems like there's a haunting of the marriage, and that the marriage has ended recently, and that your friend is now in a new apartment. So she's symbolically in a new psychic space, right? A new center of selfhood. That's what houses generally represent in her dreams. And so she's in a new space, but the space is not hers yet. It doesn't feel cleansed, cleared. There's ghosts. The ghosts represent haunting, something that's dead but has not fully let go or left. And the ex-husband, I guess at this point, or is
Mhm.
there but doesn't belong there. And so while he's not being the ghost, literally, he is part of the drama. So there's definitely more that we can explore here, but I would say that is where we can start. That it feels like a straightforward dream in terms of we're clearing out the ghosts. They're
Mhm.
still lingering, and of course they're still there, even if we've moved into a new psychic territory, a new sense of egohood and selfhood, which is fine and okay. And it's a nightmare, but it's also not a surprising dream to have as you're in a transition phase.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's a nightmare makes me think that there is something about the marriage's end that was intense or even
Yeah.
frightening for this
Yeah.
person. So that makes me feel sad for them. And if that's the case, I think that there's like always the healing that we have to do after something traumatic happens to
Yeah.
us. And, at the end of a relationship is also like a death. It's a death of the
Yes.
self as
Yeah.
well
It's a death of
as
that version of yourself.
exactly as you
Yes.
were in the relationship. And so, you being haunted, that is very straightforward. But, I think that the person in question who is having this dream also probably feels like there are spooky, ghosty things in their own heart still that are
Yeah.
like trying to be exorcised. And, it's like the other detail was that objects are appearing and disappearing in
Mm-hmm.
this, dream space. And so that again can be very surface level. The deeper or the surface level interpretation being like the disappearance of your old home and the disappearance of your old stuff with this person and the life that you built. And then again, like our stuff is so important for giving us a sense of who we are and, being grounded in the moment. And when we begin to lose possessions, we might also feel really destabilized. Maybe that's me as an earth sign, but
No, I think that
so
makes
this,
sense.
I think that that's also another kind of element here. It's like, do you feel like things have been taken from you? Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're losing part of yourself in the disappearance of that old environment? Or,
Yeah.
do you feel like unable to escape the sort of psychic hold that person had? And I can share a little bit, and I think I've talked about this before, but when I was much younger, when I had just graduated high school, I was having really intense night terrors about, like someone who had been in my life. And the only thing that helped me stop having these night terrors was to cultivate a lucid dreaming practice.
Yeah.
And, it was like a very simple mechanism of falling asleep, kind of trying to chill out. Like I couldn't sleep for months,
Yeah.
basically. I had to go to therapy about this because I was not sleeping and I was kind of unraveling. But I found a book on lucid dreaming, and it was a very simple exercise. Like when you're falling asleep, picture your exact hand. If you have a manicure, if you have jewelry, if you have like a birthmark, like make sure it's your particular hand. And then as you're drifting off, counting down on your fingers, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like imagining your fist closing over and over again. Eventually you kind of wake up into a dream where you're counting your fingers on your hand, and that allows your mind to realize I'm dreaming, I'm sleeping, I fell asleep doing this. And then it can make it easier to enter those dream realms and confront whatever ghosts or bad people or bad situations you have in your psyche, and kind of contend with that environment a little bit more deeply, because it sounds like this is a recurring nightmare that this person is being bothered by. So there's something unresolved in the psyche. You can do the work of talking about it. You can go to a therapist. You can talk to your friends. You can move houses. You can burn pictures of your ex, but something like in the psyche needs to kind of be untangled a little bit. And that might be a way of trying to do it, in my perspective.
I think that that's smart. I also would say that I'm not, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not an analyst, so I'm not going to pretend to
You're my therapist.
as you like to say. I'm not too worried about this dream is what I'm trying to get to. Like, we've had some dreams on this show where people are having serious, scary stuff happen. And it's like, ooh, that's a little rough. That's a little frightening. What's going on there? This one doesn't scare me, even though it's ghosty and it's scary and it feels terrifying, because of the obvious transition that this person is in. Like it's a phase of transition. That doesn't mean that it might not linger for a really long time, or there might not be a lot of ghosts in the closet. I think that it will start to pass as the new self starts to settle and emerge in this space. Mm-hmm. So that's just my little encouragement. Don't be too worried. I don't think it's anything too scary here. However, I do think that, a lot of times we'll say with these sorts of dreams, like face the ghost, turn around, look at it. I don't even think you need to look at these ghosts. I think we understand what these ghosts are about. I would encourage more of what like Christina was suggesting. What is so scary inside your heart that you really are avoiding thinking about it and spending any time with it? And it could be very scary. I would imagine that some of these ghosts are things like, I wasted the last X number of years of my life, or I'll never find somebody that I loved as much as I loved this person, or whatever those fears are, or memories of experiences with them. They're like, how did I stay with this person after we had this fight, or whatever it might be. That's very, very scary to look at. I would just spend some time getting comfortable with those ideas, making them less foreign and less like a haunting. The card that comes to mind whenever I have people who have experiences like this is the 9 of Swords, where we are so afraid of the sword that hover over us that we can't look at them. We can't take them down off the wall. We can't use them to defend ourselves. They are just there looming, and they become ghosts. So they become a haunting. And the only power we have is to use our intellect and our analytical mind, our discernment, to say, well, maybe I need to objectively understand this a little bit better so that it's not as emotionally, stultifying and terrifying. So, just gently, whatever the thing is that you most don't want to think about, most don't want to talk about, most don't want to face, just gently let it come into the mind, hold it in the heart, literally picture yourself cupping it in the heart for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and drop it. This is something that I begin my tarot practices, my tarot readings with, is letting in all of that stuff, asking my clients to bring it in, pull it in, grab it all up, hold it as tight as you can. All that stuff is terrifying to think about. Hold it and then drop it. And now as you drop it, you'll find yourself a little bit opened, a little bit more cleared out, a little bit more cleansed of the terror and the need to push it away. And it'll get easier and easier to hold that. And obviously therapy is a great thing probably for you in the transition. If your friend's not already thinking about it, I would recommend it, just so that it's not as lonely to go through that. But I think these ghosts will find their own way out of the house once they become less ghosty.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing the dream with us. It's a very personal one. So, well, the friend sharing the dream for the friend.
Yes,
and we hope
cute.
that it it offered something. Go do Christina's class. Absolutely do it. That is, I mean, the thing is, like, you're probably not going to offer it for a long time, because you got transitions happening of your own, stuff's going on. It's going to be a busy rest of the year. So if you have been thinking about it, now is the time for sure. So do it, and we'll see you, I guess, in the next episode.
Yes, we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for joining us in our conversation today.
Please consider supporting the podcast by leaving a review and following Soror Mystica wherever you listen.
You can also become a more active supporter and a member of the Soror Mystica community by joining us on our Mighty Networks platform.
If you have a symbolic experience that you'd like to share with us for the podcast, you can tell us all about it at sorormysticapodcast.com.
The music for this podcast is written and performed by me, Mariana Lewis, with special thanks to Stefan Lewis. You can connect with both Christina and myself on Instagram and get to know our work by clicking on the links in the show notes.
As the alchemical motto goes, as above, so below, as within, so without.
May this ancient wisdom continue to guide you deeper.
Until next time, take good care.